Snow slammed sideways through the trees. Wind howled like wolves on a hunt. Owen Briggs, the cowboy, leaned forward in the saddle. His coat was soaked, his fingers numb. The wool blanket around his shoulders was the only thing keeping him alive. The trail was gone. White covered everything. Owen couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Only pine trunks, only snow. Then something moved, down by a fallen log. Owen Briggs pulled the horse to a stop. He stared. A small lump. Not snow, not rock. A shape. Curled tight. Owen dismounted slowly. His boots crunched deep in the drift. The lump twitched. A hand twitched. He dropped beside it. The figure was a child, the skin pale, lips blue. Bare arms, scraped and frozen, eyes closed. One hand clutched a small leather cord. The cowboy touched the child's wrist. There was a pulse. Weak. Owen Briggs didn't hesitate. He ripped the blanket from his back. Thick wool, still warm from his body. He wrapped the child fast, tucked it close. The child stirred. Owen pressed him against his chest. "Stay with me, boy." The child's face had paint, tribal, red lines, dots. Across his chest hung a carved bone bead, tribal mark. Owen looked around. No sign of tracks, no sound. He lifted the boy, stumbled to his horse, heaved the child into the saddle. A sound cracked the air. Gunshot. Owen froze. His head snapped up. The ridge above him. Something moved. A flash of metal. Then stillness. No second shot came. No rider. No shout. Owen scanned the trees. Nothing. He pulled himself into the saddle behind the child. The blanket shifted. The bead glinted in the cold light. Owen Briggs rode toward town. Who was aiming? And why didn't they shoot? The horse staggered. Into town, legs shaking. Owen Briggs held the child tight. Snow clung to Owen's face. His coat was soaked. The wool blanket around the child was soaked too, red at the edges. Owen reached the door of the clinic. He kicked twice. The door swung open fast. A tall man stood inside, rough beard, sleeves rolled up. This was Dr. Elkins. Owen spoke first. "Found him in the gulch, barely breathing." Dr. Elkins grabbed the child. He moved fast, no questions. Owen Briggs, the cowboy, followed. Inside, the clinic smelled like smoke and vinegar. A black stove burned in the corner. Metal tools glinted. On the wall, Dr. Elkins set the child down near the heat. The child's lips were still blue, eyes half shut. Owen stepped back. His arms were shaking. Dr. Elkins peeled the wet blanket off the boy. He held it up. It dripped heavy. Blood along one edge. Pine needles stuck to the wool. The doctor paused. "Yours," Owen nodded. "Only one I had." The doctor said nothing more. He walked over and hung the blanket on a wooden rack by the fire. The wool steamed. The blood spots spread dark. The carved bead on the child's cord moved slightly. Still, around his neck, still tight, Owen touched his hat. "I'll be back at first light." Dr. Elkins gave one small nod. Owen Briggs left the clinic alone. Outside, the snow had stopped. The wind was lighter. A woman passed by the window. Her cloak was deer hide, stitched by hand. She had long dark braids and silent steps. She stopped, mid-stride, her eyes fixed on the window, not on the child, not on Dr. Elkins, on the blanket. The woman stared at the hanging wool, at the dried blood, at the edge where red thread curled near the corner, where something had once been stitched and ripped out. She didn't blink. Then she turned, slowly, and walked away. Did the tribe recognize the blanket, or the man who gave it? Boots stomped hard on the porch. The door slammed open without a knock. Sheriff Harlan stepped inside the clinic, eyes sharp, coat still dusted with snow. Dr. Elkins stood by the stove. The child lay wrapped in a clean blanket near the heat. The carved bead around the boy's neck moved with each breath. Sheriff Harlan spoke first. His voice was flat. "You know the rules, Doc. Town's not a shelter." Dr. Elkins didn't look up. It was a child. Sheriff Harlan walked in slow. His boots echoed on the wooden floor. He looked down at the sleeping boy. "Don't matter." Sheriff Harlan said. "Tribe's been watching. Folks are talking. Can't have trouble crossing that ridge." Dr. Elkins finally turned. He was near death. You want me to let a child freeze? Sheriff Harlan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled something from inside his coat. A folder. Brown, marked with a star and badge number. He tossed it onto the table. Papers slid out. A sketch stared back up. Hat low, jaw square. Rough pencil lines shaped the face. It was Owen Briggs. Sheriff Harlan tapped the page. Name came from across the ridge. Dr. Elkins frowned. The tribe? How? Sheriff Harlan shook his head. I don't know, but they said it clear. Owen Briggs gave the blanket. Dr. Elkins swallowed hard. You sure? Sheriff Harlan didn't blink. He's on their lips, which means he's on their list. One way or another? The wind outside hit the window. The fire inside crackled louder. The child stirred, not awake, but moving. The carved bead twisted on its cord. The knot held tight against the boy's collarbone. Sheriff Harlan glanced again at the child. I can't protect this town if we start crossing lines. You know that. Dr. Elkins walked over to the boy, checked his pulse. He's still cold, still weak. Sheriff Harlan's voice dropped. How tell Owen to keep out of this? Dr. Elkins looked him in the eye. He gave a blanket, not a war. The sheriff's hand tightened near his belt. But he didn't speak. Another gust hit the window. Sheriff Harlan turned, walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked back once. This town runs on order, not mercy. The door creaked shut behind him. Inside the clinic, the child moved again. Dr. Elkins watched the bead glint in the firelight. He picked up the folder. Owen Briggs's name stared back in bold letters. How did the tribe know Owen's name? Hooves pounded through snow as the ridge came into view. The woman rode fast. Her deer-hide cloak flapped in the wind. She reached the fire circle before sunrise. The elders were already seated. Smoke from sage drifted low across the stones. The woman dropped to her knees. Her breath showed in the cold air. Around her, warriors stood still. No one spoke. The woman opened her cloak. Inside was a strip of thick wool, dark, wet at the corners, and stained with dried blood. Her voice trembled. The white man gave his skin. The elders leaned forward. The oldest one, a man named Toma, took the wool in both hands. He closed his eyes. Elder Toma brought the blanket to his face. He breathed deep. Wool, ash, blood, cedar bark. The woman nodded. It was wrapped around the child. He gave it without a word. One warrior stepped forward. His name was Silas. Young, sharp eyes, bare chest under a fur-lined vest. Silas spoke strong. He gave it knowing he'd freeze. A low murmur moved through the crowd. Warriors looked at one another. Elder Toma placed the blanket down. This cloth holds more than heat, another elder whispered. Spirit-wrapped. A gift beyond balance. The woman pointed to the corner of the wool. Red thread hung loose where something had once been stitched. A mark. A name, maybe, now torn away. Silas knelt beside it. His voice dropped low. This was not a trade. This was protection. The child's carved bead, still with him in town, was not mentioned aloud. But many saw the absence, felt the thread pull. Elder Toma stared into the fire. If one gives life, what must return? Silence followed. Long and heavy, then the whispers began. Balance, debt, witness. One by one, warriors placed their hands on the blanket. No drumbeat, no chant, just silence and smoke. Why would a cowboy give warmth to a tribal child? The snow was melting. Slush ran in streams across the dirt road. Owen Briggs rode slow, head down, eyes scanning everything. The horse's hooves splashed through the thaw. The cold hadn't left, but the worst of the storm was gone. Sunlight peeked through cloud breaks. Owen's coat was stiff from frost. His back ached from the long night. The saddle creaked under his weight. As Owen neared the town's edge, something felt off. A sign nailed to a fence caught Owen's eye. White paint, red letters, do not aid, do not harbor. Owen slowed the horse. Another sign, same words, was posted on the church door, a third on the feed store. Fresh hammer marks still showed. Owen's jaw tightened. He rode on. Near the blacksmith shop, two men leaned against a barrel. Both stared as Owen passed. Neither smiled. Owen nodded once. No one nodded back. The stable came into view. Owen dismounted. The stable door was open, but no one stood inside. He walked toward the stall where he'd left supplies the night before. His saddlebag was hanging on a post. It was open. The leather had been cut, not torn, not forced. Slit. Clean under the flap. Owen ran his fingers along the edge. Whoever did it knew what they were looking for. Nothing else was touched. Behind him, a noise. Footsteps. A man across the street. Clean vest. Dusty boots. He lifted his hat. Met Owen's eyes. He didn't speak. Just watched. Owen turned. Grabbed the bag. Swung it over his shoulder. Walked down the main street. Windows watched. Curtains twitched. At the clinic, the door creaked. As Owen pushed it open, the fire was still going, tools still clean, bed still made, but the child was gone. Dr. Elkins wasn't there. Only the echo of boots on wood. Only the smell of herbs and smoke. Owen looked at the cot where the boy had slept. The folded blanket was gone. So was the boy's bead. The air in the fire. Room felt colder than outside. Owen Briggs stood still, breathing hard. Who's already made him a target? The back door opened slow. Dr. Elkins stepped into the room, wiping his hands with a cloth. His coat was wrinkled. His face looked older than yesterday. Owen Briggs stood by the empty cot. His voice was sharp. "Where is he?" Dr. Elkins didn't answer right away. He folded the cloth, set it on the table, then he spoke quiet. "Sheriff took him at dawn." Owen stared. "Took him where?" Dr. Elkins still wouldn't meet Owen's eyes. "Didn't say, only said it's for the town's safety." Owen took one step forward. He was warming up. He was safe here. Dr. Elkins looked toward the floor. Orders were clear. Owen's hands clenched at his sides. "So that's it? You just handed him over?" Dr. Elkins didn't move. "I didn't have a choice." Silence stretched. Only the fire cracked. Then Dr. Elkins reached into his pocket, pulled out something wrapped in a small cloth. He walked over, placed it in Owen's hand. Owen opened the cloth. Inside was a carved bead, bone white, same as the one the child wore. Owen ran his thumb over the surface. It felt warm. Dr. Elkins said, "Found it on the cot after they left. Thought you should have it." Owen stared at the bead. The cord was broken at the end, torn, not unknotted. Owen didn't speak. Dr. Elkins took a breath. "Maybe he left it. Maybe not." Owen looked up. His voice was low. "Or maybe it's a warning." The fire hissed. Wind tapped against the glass. Did the child leave the bead, or was it a warning? The sky above the ridge turned pale with morning. Cold wind moved through the trees, but no one spoke. In the center of the circle, the fire had burned low. Smoke drifted flat across the dirt. The elders stood in a half-ring, faces calm, eyes sharp. Silas, the young warrior, stepped forward. In his palm he held the carved bead. The bead caught light as Silas raised it to the elders. His voice was steady. "The child lives, but was taken." No one interrupted. Silas wrapped the bead in cloth. He placed it inside a leather pouch and tied it tight around his neck. "The man who gave the blanket, his name is known," Silas said. "Owen Briggs. He gave warmth and risked death." Elder Toma nodded once. "Balance must return." Another elder, a woman with silver hair, said softly, "Then let the riders go." The wind shifted. There were no drums, no calls, no painted faces. But one by one the warriors moved to their horses. Leather creaked. Hooves struck frozen ground. No one shouted. No one lifted a spear to the sky. The woman who first saw the blanket rode first. Her deer-hide cloak was wrapped tight. Her horse was lean and fast. Behind her Silas mounted. His eyes locked ahead. Across the ridge, the line of riders grew, 5, 10, then 20. Children watched from the tree line. No one cried. No one smiled. One child handed a warrior a length of red thread. The warrior tied it around his wrist. No war chants rose. No feathers brushed the air. Only the sound of breath and hoof and snow breaking beneath them. Elder Toma watched from the rocks. "They ride without song," he said. The silver-haired woman replied, "Because this is not war." Silas adjusted, the pouch around his neck. The bead inside rested near his heart. A hawk cried far above. That was the only sound. The lead rider raised a hand, and then they moved, down the slope, toward the far valley, toward the town. There were no scouts ahead, no banner raised, only eyes fixed forward. They passed the place where the child had been. Found. The snow there was still darkened, a shallow depression where body heat had melted through. The woman glanced once, then rode on. At the bottom of the slope, the riders formed a line. They crossed the stream, moved through pine. Still no words, still no war paint, still no music, just silence. Purpose moved with them. Each hand was steady, each jaw set. What does silence mean on a tribal ride? Dawn broke slow over the ridge. Light spilled across the east. Road soft and cold. Sheriff Harlan rode at the front of the patrol. 4 deputies followed, rifles slung low. Hoofbeats echoed through the trees. Dust mixed with frost in the air. They turned the bend and saw the line. Dozens of riders stood ahead, horses side by side, still, silent. The tribal warriors blocked the road like a wall. No weapons drawn, no movement, just eyes. Sheriff Harlan stopped. So did the others. The patrol spread out slightly, but no one stepped forward. Silas stood near the front. His horse didn't move. The pouch with the bead hung at his chest. Beside Silas sat the woman who had first seen the blanket. Her face gave nothing. Her hands rested calmly on the reins. Sheriff Harlan leaned forward in his saddle. "You're out of line," Sheriff Harlan called. "This is county land. Step aside." No one answered. Not a single rider moved. Sheriff Harlan raised his voice. "If you got something to say, say it." The wind rustled the trees. Then one horse moved. From the center, a rider stepped forward, not fast, not slow, just steady. The rider held something folded in both hands, dark wool, red thread at the edge. Heavy from the cold. Owen Briggs's blanket. The rider dismounted. No sound. Each bootstep landed firm on frozen dirt. The rider walked past the sheriff, past the deputies. The deputies shifted. One gripped his rifle. Sheriff Harlan raised a hand. "Hold." The rider knelt in the middle of the road. He laid the blanket down flat, stood, folded it once, precise, respectful, then turned and walked back to his horse. No one spoke. Silas's eyes met the sheriff's, not angry, not afraid, just steady. Sheriff Harlan didn't blink. But his jaw clenched. He glanced at the blanket, the same one Owen Briggs had wrapped around the child, the same one that had dried near the fire, now folded like a message in the dirt. Behind him, one deputy whispered, "Is this war?" Another said, "Feels older than that." Sheriff Harlan didn't answer. "Is this war or something older?" Sheriff Harlan's face turned red. "You block a lawman's path and stand silent? You think this is how things work?" The tribal riders remained. Still, not one blinked. Sheriff Harlan's hand moved fast, his coat flared. His revolver came up, pointed square at the front rider. "Last chance," he shouted. "You move or I make you move." The patrol behind him shifted in their saddles. Fingers touched triggers. Tension snapped through the air like a pulled wire. Then came the sound of hooves, fast, sharp, coming hard from the western slope. Owen Briggs burst through the trees, his horse charging. "Hold it!" Owen yelled. "Put it down!" Sheriff Harlan spun as Owen thundered in. Owen yanked the reins. His horse skidded sideways. Dirt flew. He leapt off and stepped between the riders and the sheriff. Owen Briggs faced the barrel. "Don't do it," Owen said, calm but loud. "You fire and you'll light something you can't put out." Sheriff Harlan's gun didn't lower. "You know what they've done. You know what this is." Owen reached into his coat. "Careful," the sheriff barked. "Real careful." Owen didn't flinch. He pulled out a small cloth, unfolded it slow. In his palm sat the carved bead, bone-white, smooth, tied with frayed leather. The bead caught the morning light. "I found him freezing," Owen said. "Gave him the only warmth I had." Silas on horseback watched without speaking. The woman beside him stared at the bead. Owen stepped forward, still holding the bead high. "He left this," Owen said. "Or maybe someone left it for me to carry." The riders said nothing. Owen crouched, laid the bead on the folded blanket in the dirt. He stood again, faced the sheriff. "They don't carry war," Owen said. "They carry memory. The wind." Picked up. Dust swirled between the two groups. Sheriff Harlan's grip loosened. The barrel dropped a little. Owen didn't move. The sheriff looked at the bead, at the blanket, then back at Owen. Owen's voice lowered. "You gonna shoot a man holding peace?" The silence lasted forever. Then the sheriff holstered his weapon. No one cheered. No one moved. The riders remained still. The bead stayed on the blanket. Will one bead stop a bullet? The wind quieted. No one moved. No one spoke. The bead lay still on the blanket in the road. From the back of the line, an old voice rose. Footsteps came slow through the horses. A figure walked forward, tall, thin, wrapped in a long fur cloak. Elder Toma stepped into the open. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. Owen Briggs stood silent. Elder Toma stopped between the two sides. His voice was strong, but calm. "You gave what cannot be returned." Owen said nothing. The elder looked at him. "Not by us, not by law, not by coin." Elder Toma turned to the riders. His eyes scanned each face. "You do not ride to demand, you ride to remember, to balance." The riders bowed their heads slightly. Then Elder Toma raised one hand and pointed to the trees behind. From the pines, a small figure stepped forward, the child alive. The child wore new hides, clean, his hair was tied back. He walked on his own, no limp, no stagger. The carved bead was gone from his neck. Owen's eyes locked on him. The child moved beside Silas's horse and looked at Owen. Elder Toma spoke again. "You gave warmth, not knowing who, not asking what. You gave with no promise." The child looked down, then slowly nodded. The sheriff didn't move. His mouth was tight, his shoulders tense. Owen looked at the blanket, then at the bead, then back at the boy. "You're safe," Owen said. "That's what matters." The boy said nothing but took one more step forward. Owen didn't move. Silas dismounted. His feet hit the ground without a sound. Silas said, "This was not debt, it was truth." The elder nodded once. "Circle closed." The child reached into his sleeve and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. Another bead, smaller, carved with a mark different than before. The child laid it gently on top of the first, then stepped back. Sheriff Harlan said nothing. Was this child ever truly lost? Sheriff Harlan stood still. His hand moved slowly to his holster. With one hard breath, he slid the revolver away. "No charges," Sheriff Harlan said. "Not today." His voice carried across the silent road. No one answered him. Silas stepped forward. The pouch still hung. From his neck, his face calm, his step steady. Behind him, one by one, the riders moved, not toward the sheriff, toward Owen Briggs. The first placed something at Owen's feet, a bundle of dried meat and bread, wrapped in leather. Another came. Next, a carved arrow with black and red bands near the fletching, the mark of a hunter. Then a girl no older than 12 stepped forward. She held a single feather, long and white, clean, unbent. She set it down gently. Owen Briggs said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the road in front of him. The last rider came slow. It was the woman in the deer-hide cloak. She held the wool blanket, but it was no longer the same. Red thread had been stitched into the corners, symbols embroidered into the fold. The bloodstain was still there, but beside it now was a mark. Not of shame, but of memory. She held it out with both hands. Owen didn't reach for it. He looked at the blanket, then at the boy, standing just behind Silas. The child watched him, silent. Owen took a step back. "No," Owen said, voice low. "That belongs to him." He nodded toward the child. The woman didn't argue. She turned, stepped past Silas, and placed the blanket over the child's shoulders. The red thread glowed in the sunlight. The wool fell heavy down the boy's back. Elder. Toma raised his head. A gift is not always meant to be kept. Sheriff Harlan looked at the ground. He didn't speak. A deputy coughed once, but stayed where he was. Owen looked at the gifts, the feather, the arrow, the bread, then back at the child. "This wasn't about me," Owen said. No one answered. The riders turned. One by one, they began to ride. Not fast, not loud. The hooves beat slow against the earth. The line moved toward the hills again. Sheriff. Harlan stayed still. The wind moved through the trees. What do you do with a gift meant to honor your pain? Owen Briggs rode alone. The town sat far behind him now. Just a line of rooftops fading into the hills. No one followed. The sky was turning gold. The wind was quiet. Only the creak of saddle leather and the steady beat of hooves filled the air. Owen stopped at a clearing near the creek. The ground here was dry. Pine needles crunched under his boots. He gathered wood by hand. Small sticks, dry branches, a ring of stones. He built the fire slow, careful, silent. Flames rose. Orange light flickered across his face. Owen sat beside the fire and reached into his coat. In his palm lay the bead, the same carved bead the boy once wore, the same one Owen had carried since the cot went empty. Owen turned it in his hand, felt the smooth edges, the groove where cord had once been tied. He held it over the flame. The fire crackled. Sparks drifted up like stars. Owen closed his hand around the bead, then opened it. He dropped the bead into the fire. The flame flickered, then steadied. The bead did not blacken, did not curl or crack. It glowed. The white bone shone brighter, not weaker. Light moved across its surface like breath. Owen stared. The fire burned steady. The bead sat in the center, untouched by heat. He didn't move. The flames whispered. The sun dipped lower behind the ridge. Owen reached for his hat, placed it over his knee, and stared into the fire. The narrator spoke. Not every man leaves a trail, in dust or law. Some leave it in what they gave. The bead remained, still whole, still glowing. What stays behind when warmth is given away? You'll know him by what he gives, not what he gets.